Jacob's conniving ways have gotten him in a lot of trouble back home. His brother is now threatened to kill him. And his mother, as you'll recall from the scripture we looked at last week, loves him very dearly and doesn't want any harm to come to him. So he suggests that he flees. And this has a dual purpose, because not only is he fleeing his brother's wrath, but he's also headed towards Canaan, towards the land that his grandfather Abraham came from. He is of an age where he is going to think about settling down and getting married and maybe having a family. And so, like his father before him, a potential bride may be there in Canaan. But unlike his father Isaac, a matchmaker is not going to go and work out the details for him. Jacob is going to do it on his own. And given the kind of person he is, that's probably wise. And now he's at the point where he is alone in the wilderness, and he stops for the night to sleep, taking a rock and putting that under his head as his pillow. I can't imagine having a good night's sleep under those conditions. But that was actually very common for these ancient and nomadic people. And while he was there, he falls asleep deeply enough to have a very vivid dream that influences not only him, but his people who will follow him. And you are aware of this dream and the details of it. The exact description of what Jacob sees varies depending on the translation of Scripture you're reading, based on what archaeologists have uncovered and what Bible scholars point out to us. It may be that what Jacob sees is what was known as a ziggurat. This was a tower that was a four-sided obelisk, similar to the Washington Monument. But it had slanted stairs going up each side, so in a corkscrew-like motion, people could get to the top of it. And ancient people would use these as temples or holy spaces, where the priest would go to the very top of it and they would carry out sacrifices. And they would burn these along with incense, where the smoke would go up to the gods. That's the image that Jacob sees, but this image is not one that's man-made. It's one that was created by God. And there are angels, God's messengers, who are ascending and descending the steps leading up to heaven, showing this image that says that God doesn't just dwell up in the heavens and look down on us in a bemused way, but is actively involved in the lives of people. This is a vision that Jacob could not see while he was awake. It is the kind of vision that comes to him while he's asleep. And it gives him a glimpse into the spiritual realm, to know that when you and I look out on the world, we see the elements doing whatever they're going to do, and we see people acting the way they do. But behind everything that we can visibly see, God is actively involved in creation and in the lives of human beings. That's the image that is revealed to Jacob in this dream. And it inspires him afterwards. So he takes the rock that his head was on and he anoints it. And he declares that this place is sacred and holy. And he names it Bethel, a name that simply means house of God. Beth meaning house, and El meaning God. It's one of the many stories that we have in Scripture about people feeling like they've received direct messages from God in their dreams. Now, dreams can be the kind of wacky and sometimes disturbing things that keep us up at night or make it hard for us to go back to sleep. The kind of things that some people can just sort of shrug off and ignore. And there are other people, though, who wind up being fascinated with dreams and trying to consider what it means. And there's been lots of good company to this effect. Many artists of different mediums have been inspired by what they've dreamed. The fiction of Edgar Allan Poe is an example of this. And also great scientists have been inspired by this too, such as Albert Einstein. Those who were the fathers of modern psychology, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, believed that dreams were our subconscious's way of trying to tell us something that consciously we weren't aware of, or maybe we were trying to ignore or to overlook. It's one of these things that's been a source of fascination for many. And all throughout the Bible we find men and women of faith considering their dreams to be messages from God. And people are considered to have received a special blessing from God if they've received a dream that they can interpret, or if they're able to interpret someone else's dream. Earlier in Genesis, Joseph is this way. Someone who has the ability not only to interpret his dreams, but others as well. That gets him out of jail, where he was because he was falsely accused of a crime. It gives the fate of two of the people who was in jail with him, one who turns out favorably, the other less so. It also provides a warning to Pharaoh that helps to save all of the people from an upcoming famine. Later on, Daniel, who practices his faith and represents one of the heroes of the faith in exile in Babylon, also has the ability to interpret dreams and to interpret what God is saying through dreams to his people. And in the New Testament, in the Gospel of Matthew, we find that Joseph, who marries Mary and is the pious earthly father of Jesus, is someone who is communicated to through dreams by God, telling him valuable things that will enable him to take Mary to be his wife and then protect the Holy Family when Jesus' life is threatened by Herod. Throughout the centuries, people of faith have looked to the Scriptures and understood dreams as God's way of communicating with us at times. There are other ways that we expect for God to communicate with us, such as in reading Scripture and in prayers that we offer, praying for one another and praying for ourselves. But dream interpretation is something that is also a spiritual discipline. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to go to a series of classes that a Christian spiritual director was offering on dream interpretation as a spiritual discipline. We began by looking at all of these many examples in Scripture of where people felt like God was giving them a special message through their dreams. If we consider what a dream is something that comes from our mind, that comes from inside of us, but not something we control. So it's understandable how people of faith throughout the years could see this as something mysterious working inside of them, giving them a message from God. We had a very interesting and diverse group in this class that met for a few weeks. And we began by sharing some of our dreams that we had and talking in as much detail as we could offer about what we had experienced and how the dream affected us. If it's something that we just woke up from, made a few notes, and went back to sleep, or if it's something that maybe unnerved us so it kept us up for the rest of the night. And then over the weeks ahead, after sharing our dreams, we went through exercises to analyze them. The first one had to do with somebody sharing a dream, and other people offered reflections on the dream, not speaking directly to the person in a way that might seem to critique or judge that person, but in an evaluative manner, saying, if it were my dream, I'd wonder about this. Or if it were my dream, I'd be curious about that. Next, we practiced dream theater. where somebody would share a dream and then appoint other people in the group to act out that dream. The person who shared the dream would be the director and give guidance to people. But then the other people in the group would kind of improv and acting it out. And if the dream was something that was disturbing to us, then we would first act it out, and the person who shared the dream would give his or her feelings and say, this is how I feel now when I can see my dream in this objective format. And then the spiritual director would invite that person, now we'll go through and do the dream again, but this time change whatever was unsettling to you. Have it end in a way that you'd rather see it end. One of my classmates shared a dream where she was in a convertible with her daughter, and her daughter had on a long scarf that went around her head and around her neck. And as her daughter was driving faster and faster, she was laughing maniacally. And she said that the scarf grew so it suddenly covered her face and she couldn't see where she was going. But her daughter continued to laugh. So we offered this interpretation of the dream as she had represented it. And then when the person who was directing the dream had us reevaluate, she had her daughter slow down and follow her advice to pull over at a sandwich shop and to stop so that they could talk about that. After this, there was another exercise we did that was based on a psychology known as Gestalt technique. This is the kind of therapy where someone has an issue with someone who has hurt them very much. And for various reasons, maybe because the person is deceased, or because approaching that person would be dangerous to them, they cannot interact with them. So in this technique, a psychologist invites somebody to look at an empty chair and to imagine that this person is sitting there and to say to the chair what you would like to say to that person as a way of getting at the issues that may be within us underneath the surface. In this particular context, the director would say to somebody, now you can imagine that who or whatever in your dream that was unsettling to you is sitting there. One of my classmates shared a dream where she was in a grocery store, but it was a grocery store that she wasn't particularly familiar with. And it was sort of like a maze where every time she turned down a different aisle, it would lead her to another dead end. And she felt kind of trapped and enclosed on it. So for that particular exercise, the director invited her to imagine that in the chair would have been seated the grocery store itself to say to the store what you want to say to them. And throughout all of these, the spiritual director that led this kept bringing us back to the idea that we were doing this as a spiritual exercise. And so we were invited to consider, where is Christ present in your dream? So if we were having a nightmare, for instance, something that was disturbing, let's say you're having a nightmare where you're hanging off of a cliff, and as you're hanging onto it and your hands are getting tired, suddenly you feel a strong hand grab onto your forearm and pull you up. Maybe that person's arm represents Christ for you. Or maybe you're having a dream where you're in a strange neighborhood and some kind of a wild animal or a monster is following you and pursuing you. And suddenly, out of an alleyway comes a large dog that gets between you and that monster and barks at that monster. Christ might be present as that dog. Or if you're having a dream where it's the end of the day and it's getting dark, and you're out in the woods and you're afraid because you don't know where you are and you can't find your way back home. And you come across a house, a cabin that's there in the woods with a light shining in the window. That light might represent Christ. These are some of the many ways that you can consider how Christ was present in your dreams. Now, in order to do this, in order to understand and try to interpret our dreams as messages from God,
We first need a very open spirit, and it also helps to have an active imagination. So if you are not somebody who has that kind of vivid imagination, this is something that is best carried out as a group exercise, like I have described in this particular class. To share our dreams with others and to imagine these different ways in which we can interpret them. To consider how Christ might be present in our dreams. I shared 2 dreams. And the first dream that I shared was a dream where Dina and I were at a banquet. And I know she and I have talked, because we are fascinated with this topic, that whenever I dream about places, I find it's not one place I've been, but it winds up being a combination of things. Maybe a cafeteria, an office, a house. It's like my mind is taking all of these places I've gone and combining it into some new area. And we were in one of these nondescript type banquet areas. And the meal was a Thanksgiving type meal with carved turkey and with stuffing and with gravy. And we're in line and people are talking to one another and they're happy and they're laughing and they're glad to be there. But suddenly somebody says, wait a minute, we are out of something. And we look at the buffet line and one of the trays is completely empty. And everybody in the room then immediately stops talking and laughing. And they turn and they stare at me. And I have this awkward feeling as I think, but I don't work here. I've worked in hospitality, but not here, and I don't know what to do. And then someone else said, it's okay, because James Taylor is the host. And the 70s folk rock icon comes saddling in and gets the empty tray and leaves, and everybody goes back to their pleasant conversations. When I shared this dream with class, and they first did the exercise of offering reflective questions, one of my classmates said, well, if it were my dream, I would be curious about the type of cuisine. Is there a significance in the fact that this was a Thanksgiving meal? Someone else said, after I shared 2 dreams, and in both those dreams, Dina and I were there together, said, well, for my dream, I think it's significant that your spouse is always with you in these dreams. Whenever we did dream theater, we never acted out any of mine, but one of my classmates was really anxious to, because when the director asked us the first time we did it, all right, who wants to act out a dream now? Then my classmate pointed at me and said, I'm going to do his because I don't need James Taylor. We did not act it out, but as we were exploring this, I realized that what I was experiencing was a stress dream. A stress dream is one of those dreams where you dream that you are in school, or you're back in school, and your homework assignment is due, but you not only don't have it, you don't have your books either, and you're not sure what class you're in. Or a stress dream is when you are at a train station, and you're trying to catch a train, but the train is just beginning to pull off, and it's just out of your reach. This was one of those stress dreams that pastors have. When I, as a pastor, am serving a congregation, like so many congregations today, where resources are dwindling, as people work harder and harder, and they don't have all of the labor that they used to be able to offer, and our financial resources are limited, and our physical plant begins to crumble. It's one of those experiences that I've been in real life a whole lot of times, where I feel like people are looking at me saying, you're the pastor, you're the leader, you do something. And during times like that, I need to be reminded that as a shepherd, as a pastor and a spiritual leader of a congregation, I fulfill a role, but ultimately, I'm not in charge. When the director asked me, so in this dream, who is Christ? Well, it was obviously James here. I need to be reminded as a pastor that I am not in charge, Christ is. And Christ will direct me as I direct a congregation to be good stewards of the resources we have. It's one of those experiences that we as Wesleyans talk about as justification, knowing that God's grace is sufficient and Christ's resources are abundant and there for us all. It's something that I continuously need to be reminded of. And on that occasion, God reminded me of it in my dreams. Dream interpretation is a spiritual discipline. It is not something that I would recommend to you as your only spiritual discipline. Communal worship, participating in the sacrament of communion, reading the Bible, praying in many forms, these are all spiritual disciplines that we practice. But if we want to grow in grace and mature in the faith, it helps us to stretch out of our familiar patterns and to do something new. And looking to our dreams as the place where God may present God's self to us is a very ancient and exciting tool for considering where God may be leading us. It can also be unnerving. So that's why it is challenging not only to do this, but to do it within small groups. So I have set the stage here. I've talked to you about how this is done, and I've shared one of my dreams with you. I now invite you to do this with one another. Share your dreams in Sunday school, in UMW, before choir practice, in impromptu small groups that might gather here at some point during the week. Allow one another to hear these parts of you that you normally don't share with others. And consider together as a community of faith, inviting the Holy Spirit to guide you and to work through your imagination, to consider what God might be saying to you. Jacob considered his dream to be a sign that the place where he was sacred and holy, and he consecrated it and named it Bethel, the house of God. And as you know, for those of you who have read Genesis, Jacob goes on to have his name changed by God and become Israel. So the dream that he had was one that not only spoke to his own experience, but the future of his people. So I invite you to consider your dreams and consider one another's dreams. Look for God there in that hidden and mysterious language, so that, like Jacob, we may be awakened to a vision that will direct us someplace, to a ministry that we never even thought of, to do things that we didn't imagine we could do, to go off in a direction that doesn't represent our plans, but something that God revealed to us in our dreams. Amen.